Okay, so last but definitely not least, I want to welcome someone on stage who is also an absolute expert in her field, Melissa Perri, who is already at Productized for the second time. Last time was back in 2018, and we must have done something right. So thank you so much for being with us, Melissa. Melissa is a strategic advisor, author, and board member that works with executives to enable growth through building impactful product strategies and organizations. Currently, Melissa is the CEO and founder at Productized Labs, which offers e-learning for product people through Product Institute and the CPO Accelerator. She's also a board member and a board advisor for scale-up companies and runs the Product Thinking podcast, which I guess most of you have heard. Melissa previously taught product management at Harvard Business School. The title of her talk today is Beyond the Build Trap, and please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker today, Melissa Perri. Thank you.
Hi, how's everybody doing? Good? How was your day? Let's hear a round of applause for everybody. What a day. I am so excited that I got to sit here and actually listen to all the talks too. And we're going to see some trends because I'm going to pull some of the things that we heard about product strategy, product operations together to help close us out. I'm very excited to be back in Lisbon. As we heard, I was here in 2018. Lisbon's one of my favorite cities. So anytime I get to come back here, good for me. So thank you all for having me again. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Beyond the Build Trap. So back in 2018, actually when I was here, that's wild. I think right after I came here, I released the book, Escaping the Build Trap. And I'd worked 2.5 years on it, and I poured my heart and soul into this book, talking about what good product management looks like. So I had been working with companies for years on standing up product management, getting them to understand what product managers do. Do we even need product managers, right? I love that question. And I found that over time, looking back from where we came from around 2015 to now, we've actually made some really good progress to get product management on the map. I mean, there's 400 of you here. We've got product managers being hired all the time. It's one of the hardest jobs to actually hire for, so we're making really good progress. So what I've been observing in companies is that we finally don't have to fight about things like, should we go talk to customers? Should we build a prototype, right? Should we do MVPs? Although not everybody still knows what an MVP is, but that's okay. We're working on that. Is UX design important? And of course, some companies are, further along than others, but I think it's safe to say that many companies, and I've been observing this from leadership teams too, understand that product management is important, and they understand that we need to do these things right? We need to get people focused on the problem. We need to make sure they're testing. We need to make sure they're experimenting, all of those things. So I'm really excited about that. But we still have some ways to go, right? So like everybody else in the world, I have a podcast. Whoops. But on the podcast, I let people write into me on this Dear Melissa segment and ask me any question. And at the end of 2022, I went through all these questions, and I tried to figure out what were product managers concerned about and what's happening in the industry. And it came down to two big themes that people were asking about. They said, okay, I get the product management thing now, but how do we scale this through an organization, right? What do we do to make sure product management value scales? And then two, it was how do I get the rest of my company on board? Right? How do I get everybody else to understand that product management is important? So we're still seeing some of this friction, right? What I've observed out there, though, is that we have a bunch of leaders going, I want to be product-led, right? And then we get a bunch of product managers that are saying, I want to be product-led. But when we actually try to implement that in the company and do product-led things, it's like pulling teeth to get everybody to actually do that. Right? Sales is like, yeah, I didn't know what I was talking about. I don't want to do that, right? Like marketing is like, nah, right? Development's like, let's not be product-led. Let's just get away from that. So there's some energy out there about this, and yet we're still facing friction. Why does that happen? Why can't we actually implement this? Well, one thing that's happening in a lot of organizations is that they misinterpret what product-led means. And they think that product-led means product management rules everything, right? They think the product managers make all the decisions and they're not allowed to have any input whatsoever. So they think their product management team is going to be like, listen to me, peons, you must do everything that I tell you to, right? And there's some product managers out there as well who also think that's true. That's not true, right? This is not actually what product-led means. It doesn't mean that product managers rule the world. It doesn't mean that the other functions in an organization are less. So what does product-led actually mean? Well, it means that the product leads our growth, right? And we're organizing around the product and the value that it provides to our customers, the problems it solves, the values that we provide through our solutions to lead the growth of the company. So what we're trying to do is all work together as a team to make sure that that product is so valuable that customers really want it. So that's what product-led really means, right? That's what we have to concentrate. And yet a lot of people still confuse this, and they're not really on board. So when we think about actually doing product-led stuff, we have to understand that it takes a lot to actually go into defining a product. It's not just a product manager sitting in a corner making a decision, right? They have to go get the customer and user research. They've got to go get market research and data to synthesize that, right? Talking to product marketing, talking to the marketing folks, talking to business folks, financial data, implications on sales, user data, technology implications. So building a product is a team sport, right? It takes everybody actually coming around this to bring it together. And that's incredibly important. And that's something that we need to remember. So what's happening here is the reason we're not doing this and we're not aligning around it is because as companies, we're really good at working small, but we're not good at thinking big. We're not thinking about how this all comes together and works together to create great products. So why, right? Why are we all stuck thinking small? Well, it's kind of the culture of what we look at in our organizations. And I want to talk about what culture really looks like. And I love this definition. So while national cultures are based on deeply held values, organizational cultures are more concerned with practices. And the repetition of those practices or behaviors within a workplace help to define the organization's culture. So think about your organization's culture. What are the practices or behaviors that you're doing in service of product, right? What do people do every day? What do they say every day? What do we really communicate when we talk about product management? Well, what happens is our practices and our behaviors and our language, they all go back to these things. And these things are very specific to just product management, right? Just our product team, UX team, and our developers. And we don't talk about how everybody comes together to help contribute to the product across the organization, like sales and marketing. So when we talk about thinking big versus working small, we get so stuck sometimes in the processes, in the agile bullshit, right? All that type of stuff. And we're not really thinking about how does this scale to the rest of the organization? How do we build great products? And that's missing. That kind of mentality is missing in many organizations. So that's what we're trying to solve here. And I like to liken this to a little analogy. So let me give you an example here. Pretend you run a restaurant. I like to eat, so let's run a restaurant. You hire a chef who's fantastic at cooking vegetables. This person can julienne anything. They can make all these fantastic vegetables. You hire somebody else who's fantastic at meat. They can cook all this beautiful fish, all this meat. They got that, right? You got somebody who's doing the sauce. I know there's a name for it. I don't remember what it is. And then you get all these people individually working on this stuff. You put it together on a plate, and you serve it to people. And if you don't have the right ingredients, they're going to be like, this is crap, right? Because there's no menu, right? You didn't think about how that fish went with that sauce, went with those vegetables, how it all came together to make a great experience. Instead, you let everybody in a silo work on their own. And it's the same if you think about the lines in a kitchen, right? To make a successful kitchen, if you want to be a 3 Michelin star restaurant, right, and not a McDonald's, you got to tell everybody over here how we work together. You've got to have a beautiful menu that brings everything together. You've got to have a great experience. You've got to have a great recipe for your food. It can't just be about one individual's skills or one function's skills. So that's how we get to working like a great kitchen, and this is what's kind of missing. So why is this missing in organizations, and why are people reluctant to actually move towards a product-led mindset that can get us there? Well, it really comes down to 2 things. The first is a lack of knowledge. The other disciplines in organizations, they just don't know how to work with product management. So I hear this a lot from sales leaders. I work with a lot of CEOs. I work with a lot of financial people too. And they go, how do I plug in, right? I don't know where we fit into this process, right? Does product management just go do everything over here, or do I get a say as well? So they just don't know how it works, and they're not really sure how they fit into the picture. The other thing that causes all this friction is a lack of control, of course, right? Because now when we say we're going to product-led and we are having product managers make ultimate decisions on things, they feel a lack of control. And in many organizations, as we shifted from being, let's say, sales-driven or marketing-driven or business-driven if you work in a bank, usually the GM or that business person, they were in control, right? They made all the decisions and they didn't need to collaborate across it. So now they're feeling a lack of control and they don't know how, again, they fit in and what they can actually control. So these 2 things are causing a lot of friction in these organizations, and that's something that we have to solve, and we can solve through product management. So the 2 things that get us there, that help actually solve these problems, is a concentration on product strategy, and product strategy tells us what we're going to work on, right? What we're going to go after, why we're going after it, how we all lead the way. And then how we do it is product operations, right? How do we all come together to actually execute on that? And those 2 things can help us move our organizations in a better product-led way. The biggest gap I see in organizations, and we've been talking about this a lot today, I heard Tammy talk about it, I heard Gonzalo talk about it, product strategy. There is a huge lack of product strategy in organizations. And this really prevents us from doing great work as product managers, right? It prevents us from all coming around building great products. So think about product strategy as your recipe, right? It's the recipe for your dish and how it all comes together to really be delicious. But it's not just that, it's the whole experience, right? It's the whole experience of how the restaurant works so that they can deliver a fantastic product. So we needed to nail that so that we can all start working in the same direction. So when there is a lack of strategy, you can actually see some perceived gaps. And I wrote about this in Escaping the Build Trap. So this concept comes from Stephen Bungay in The Art of Action. How many people have read The Art of Action? Anybody in here? I heard a couple people read it. It's a fantastic book on strategy deployment and where you can see these gaps. So what Stephen talks about is that we have outcomes, plans, and actions, and when they're all aligned and we're moving in the right direction, we can see these things align and hit our strategy. But if there is a difference between our plans and our outcomes, if there's a gap between those, so we make these plans and then we're not hitting the outcomes we thought, there's a knowledge gap. And what you can see in your organization with the knowledge gap is when leaders demand more information. They don't know what's going on. How many people have leaders that go, tell me what you're working on. Give me access to your Jira. Right? I want to report every single day of what all the teams are doing. I had a CEO that I was working with in a 5,000-person company digging through Jira, trying to figure out what was going on. And I was like, get the hell out of Jira. This is not for you. I can't even understand what's in Jira because it's a mess. Like, that's not going to help you, right? But this is the knowledge gap. What they're doing, what's happening here with the knowledge gap, is that they keep demanding more information because they don't understand how the actions of the teams are and the plans that you're making actually produce outcomes. They can't see that connection right there. Now, when there's a gap between our plans and our actions, That's an alignment gap. So for example, we got all these plans going on, and teams might be going in so many different directions. So this is when you could be peanut buttering your strategy, is what I like to call it, right? We've got 500 teams running in 8,000 different directions, and we're not producing anything, right? Like we feel like we're working like crazy, but we're not hitting goals, right? We're not seeing meaningful work. We're working really small, and we're working really spread out. So that's when there's an alignment gap. This also gets produced when you have sales coming over to you and saying, build this thing. And you're like, no, I'm building this thing. And they're like, but I told you to build this thing. You're like, okay, which one do I go with, right? Alignment gap across the organization. The last gap is between your actions and your outcomes, right? What the teams are actually doing, aligning it back to outcomes, and that's the effects gap. So we're doing all of this work, and then what, right? Everybody's running around. We've got like 5,000 people developing. What did the business do? Did it actually achieve anything? Did we hit any goals? Did we make money? Did we actually produce results? Now, when we perceive an effects gap, what happens? We start blaming everybody. It's the developer's fault. They didn't code fast enough. It's the product manager's fault, because it's always our fault. It's the marketing team's fault. It's the sales fault, right? So people start shifting the blame over and over to each other because they're like, what happened? Why did we all fall apart? So this is a good sign that you are lacking strategy, if you see any of these gaps. Now, what happens here and why we lack it is because we usually have some kind of company vision on top, and then we just got a bunch of solutions. So it's like the CEO goes, we want to be the best bank, right? Make money. That's our vision. Make money, right? And then they go to the teams, and the teams are like, what? How do you want me to make money? You want me to like go work at McDonald's down the street? I can make money, right? How, right? How do we actually put this all together? So what's missing here is what I call the missing middle. And there's a lot of layers here, but we're missing some strategic layers on our strategy. So what we do typically is start at the top with the company vision, and we just do those options on the bottom, and we do not do anything in the middle. So Tammy and Gonzalo both talked about strategic intents. This is incredibly important. As an organization, we have to come together as a whole business to set our priorities for strategic intents, which means across all of our divisions, how do we work together to achieve our goals? What's most important? Is it going upmarket, or is it expanding geographically? Like, which one are we going to choose? And strategic intents affect everybody, not just product managers, right? They affect the entire company, and they align the entire company. So your leadership, your senior leadership usually sets that. It's 1 to 3 years out. This all scales on a time horizon based on how fast you can ship. If you ship fast, you can achieve these things faster. If you ship slow, it's going to take a little longer. Bigger the company, usually the slower you ship. You can see where I'm going with this. Once you have that, now we can set the product strategy, right? Now we can look at our product portfolio, and we say, how do these software products come together to actually achieve that company vision, right? How do we actually get that far? And that's what our chief product officers and our VPs do collaboratively to figure out how all the individual products come together. Now, if you don't have more than one product, that part goes away. That's okay. You skip down to the next piece. So then we're going to look at the individual product strategies. What does that product do to grow? What are our initiatives there? And we're prioritizing the big problems we want to solve for our customers. This is problem-focused, right? Value-focused, how we can actually achieve things for customers. And then the teams figure out the solutions. So what a lot of companies are doing are just skipping these middle pieces. And instead, they're like, get ARR. And then they say, build that, right? Build this one thing, build this workflow, get ARR. So they're not connecting all these things up and down and across. And that's what really produces these gaps. So why do we do that? Traditionally, in organizations, what's happening is that as we grow, we start to silo with a lot of functional specialties, right? We got your product department, we got your marketing department, we got your CRO and sales department, we got your customer service, everybody, right? Sometimes teams have huge C-suites, and everybody has their own strategy. So the CEO's like, go make strategies. So then product's got a strategy, marketing's got a strategy, CRO has a strategy, and nobody has a combined strategy, right? Like nobody's actually coming together to do those things. So they're working independently and deploying it down, but they're not really working across. And what's happening over time, and SaaS companies are already there, but some of these software-enabled companies like banks and stuff are catching up, is we're starting to realize that it's not good to work in functions because we need to collaborate around the product. And our product and our businesses are getting very intertwined, right? It used to be that we saw sales as the business, right? And product and tech were like, there wasn't even product, but like tech was just the IT people over there. So like we just told them what to do and we figured it out from the business. But as we become more software driven, as organizations see software as like a really key part, they're realizing that these things are coming together. And even in large banks, for example, you're starting to see a merging of business people and product people into the same type of teams, or we got product people with the business mindset, right, who are taking over as GMs. So in order to be product-led and get around this, we need all those functions to start working together, and especially at the C-suite, right? It starts at the C-suite where all of these people should be getting together and creating the strategic intents. And this is a big issue for companies, because if you have sales arguing with product, arguing with marketing, arguing with technology, and everybody's not aligned, it's almost always because there's some lack of strategic intents that cut across everybody. It's the number one issue that I've fixed with companies that have aligned them. Like once you fix this problem, there's a lot of other problems to fix, but it does fix a major issue, right, of alignment and where we're going. So this is the most important thing that the C-suite could be working on. But for us, on the teams, as a director of product, as a VP of product, when we're thinking about our product strategies, we also need to work together with the rest of the organization. We need to be going to talk to sales about what they're hearing from customers, what they see. We need to talk to tech about what are capabilities that we have, how do we scale, how do we look at our platform, and we have to work with design, marketing, everybody. So we need to really treat this as a team sport where we are the people at the center helping to bring people together, right? It's not just an individual area. So to do this, we need to have a good strategy framework that allows us to come together and start to think about these things. So to set the different layers, I like to refer to something that I call the product kata, which is based off Toyota kata. So to set each one of those intents, to set that strategy, what we need to be doing is deploying strategy down. So for example, the C-suite would go, here's my strategic intents, here's my vision, as Gonzalo said, like that's what he communicates to people. And then they understand it, they start to understand the direction. Then they go and analyze the current state. And Tammy mentioned this before. Now you have to say, where are we with my area in relation to where we're going? What's the current state? And to do that, you need a ton of data, right? You need to do data and analysis. A big issue I see people do is we wait till November to go set our roadmaps for next year, and we lock ourselves in a room, and we don't do any data and analysis to figure out where we are today before we actually set the goals for next year. That is bad, right? That doesn't actually help us set good strategy. Once you have that, that's where you set the next goal, right? That's where you set your piece of strategy, and then you can execute towards the goal. And that's where all these experiments, MVPs, prototyping, that type of stuff comes in, right? We need to do this work before we just jump into experimentation. It's not just about experimenting for the sake of experimentation. It's not about running as many A/B tests as you can. It's about getting to that direction, right? And once you do that, you start to feed back and analyze the results and start to think about, okay, where am I now? And hopefully, you're closer to the goal, right? So what this type of framework does is it promotes learning. And it should promote learning across an organization where you're constantly like, where am I? What problems are standing in the way of me getting there? How do I actually tackle those problems? And what did I learn from doing that? Now, this is not just for product managers, right? I feel like a lot of times we've been told, or the way that I've seen people be trained at organizations is it's like, go train all the product managers. But we're not training the leaders, right? We're not training the middle level. So this actually scales with strategy deployment. Like executives need to do the same exact thing to set the strategic intents. They have to deploy it down to the CPOs and the VPs of product. The CPOs involved in the top as well. So they do it for the portfolio strategy, it comes down to the product strategy, and then it comes down to the teams, right? So everybody has to be analyzing these current states, figuring out what the next goal is, and you're taking basically a large vision and making it a little bit more concrete to set direction. This is not about dictating exactly what to do. It's about confining things to the directions that we want to go to. So when you do this as well, this shouldn't be just super top-down. What it is it goes top-down, bottom-up. So at each level here, we're actually feeding back up into the organization. So CEO and the exec team feeds down the strategic intents. The product people go, okay, this is what I think we can do with the portfolio strategy. Do we have to refine our strategic intents based on what we can deliver? Do we have to actually see if they're realistic? And we go up and down and across. So we're aligning at each level here. And then we're communicating the feedback once we hit the goals or get closer to them above, and we keep adjusting. So this is cyclical, right? So this is constantly evolving. Now, if you do strategy well like this too, what should happen is this should be continuous. So we shouldn't have to lock ourselves in a room in November and make up a roadmap that we're going to throw out in 3 weeks, right? It's something where there's an arbitrary dates when it comes to years, right? Arbitrary dates when it comes to product strategy. Nobody really accomplishes everything by December 31st, right? Some things need to go a little bit longer. So if we think about these in time horizons and we get ahead of setting strategy, what we could be doing is adding new initiatives as we go along, instead of just throwing everything out and starting over again in November. So this should be continuous. And that's the goal that we want to get to. That is the pillar of doing strategy well and deploying strategy well. What this also does is it helps us connect what we're doing back to the money. So one of the big issues that I hear from CEOs a lot is, my product managers are not business-minded. Has anybody ever been told that? Like, you're not business-minded enough, you don't connect to the financials? I've been told that in the past, for sure. Like, this was a huge learning for me personally. How does the financials of a company and the way you make money connect down to your work? And if you get good at telling that story, you're going to see a different side to the executives. They're going to start to understand what you're doing. So a lot of times when we're communicating about process, we're communicating about some of the work that we're doing, but we're not tying it back to what executives talk about, which is money, ARR, company growth, how we're doing that. If you align all of those strategies up and down, it becomes really easy for you to say, my team is working on this workflow. And what that does is it contributes to this product initiative, and that product initiative is directly tied to this strategic intent, which is going to allow us to expand geographically, which is tied to this expansion in TAM or SAM. It's incredibly hard to pull things back to the money without having an aligned strategy, and it makes it harder for everybody. So if you have executives asking you, I don't know what I get for my investment, or tell me what my ROI is, it's usually because we're missing those pieces to connect the money back. So when we do this well, that becomes really, really easy, and it becomes a lot more transparent for them. So that is why product strategy is so important. That is why it really helps bring organizations together more towards this product-led mindset. Now, the hardest part with product strategy is this piece, too, is analyzing this current state and getting the data analysis. And that's a big issue. How many people can look up right now any data to see how their products are performing, and at the drop of a button, not ask anybody else? You have full power to data. Couple people? Cool. Not as many as I would like to see, but I'm glad that you guys can. So this is a big issue for many companies because they're not empowering their product folks to go get the data they need. That is where product operations comes in. So product operations is about the how, right? How do we inform strategy? How do we get the data that we need? How do we do the processes set strategy? But how do we enable our product managers and our product teams to do great work? It's an enablement metric, right? It's an enablement function. So Annabella told us a little bit about how they do product strategy as well. I'm going to break down what our philosophy is on it too. So this is a way that your kitchen works, right? So think about this as your product operating model. How do you all come together to build great products? When we look at product operations, we have 3 main functions and pillars that we look at. One is business data and insights, and that's really aggregating data that we have internally so that we can monitor and create strategy. The second one is customer market insights. It's getting the right data into the right teams, into the product teams, about qualitative information. It's not doing user research for you. It's about streamlining user research so that you can talk to customers and you get the right feedback. The last one is about process and governance. And this is about how we operate as a product team and how we interact with other disciplines as well. How sales gets plugged in, how marketing gets plugged in. Now, the thing about this is you don't have to have all three of these things to get started with product operations. You can start from anywhere, and it depends on what your biggest problem is as an organization. I also want to point out that a lot of the stuff that you're going to see up here too, as I go through it, it's not necessarily super new. There's probably people in your organization doing this today, and that's fine, right? We just haven't called it product operations before. And what's happened is usually it's a poor product manager doing it off the side of their desk in their spare time, right? I had to go learn MongoDB to pull information out of a database when I should have been doing product management work, but I'm taking a 3-month-long class to try to query stuff, you know? That's the type of stuff that product operations helps to fix, right? It lets you concentrate on product management. And that's what we're getting at with these, with this actual function. So it helps both leaders and product managers. Now, business data and insights, we talked about all of the stuff that we need to look at to set strategy. This information comes from a lot of different places. And usually what's happening is it's locked up in different systems. We've got Salesforce, we've got Amplitude, we've got a financial system, you know, for accounting somewhere. We've got a bunch of notes that somebody took on user research somewhere. We can't find it all, and we're not aggregating it into a way where product managers can just look at it and be able to query things and get the answers they want for success metrics. So that's what business data and insights solves. It gets you the right information to create the strategy, all this stuff going in, and then it allows you to monitor as well with the right dashboards, the KPIs, and the reporting so that you know if you're on the right path. So a company that does this really well is Doodle. So Stephanie Lua, who is the CPO of Doodle, they've got 32 million customers, which is a lot of customers, a lot of data. But from the get-go, they said, we are going to set ourselves up so that anybody can get information about what we're doing in this organization. And they empowered them. They empowered every single member of the organization to be able to go into their business analytics tool, which they use Popsicle for, and just pull the information out so they can monitor what they're doing. And they connect it all the way back up to the financials. So everybody, all the product managers can connect their stuff back to the financials. Stephanie said, I can go in there, monitor my strategy, set my strategy. I don't have to ask for things from the data team because they made it possible to pull it all together. That's powerful, right? So if you're a scale-up company that's growing really fast, when I worked with a lot of scale-up companies with Insight, and I still work with a lot of scale-up companies, I say start here. I say start with business data and insights because the mark of a scale-up is being able to make strategic decisions very quickly because you're growing very fast. So you want to make sure that you're armed with data and you can monitor that strategy and change course if you have to. So that's where we would start, usually in a scale-up company. Now, the other part is customer and market insights. So Fidelity, which is a huge investment firm in the United States, they're global as well, they've got 85,000 people. They're Fortune 50 company here. They are trying to make it possible for people to go out in a very regulated, highly compliant area and talk to customers, get that customer research. So Jen Cardello, who I worked with at Athena Health previously to her going to Fidelity, she heads up their UX research function, their research ops function. And what her team does is makes it possible for product managers and anyone really in the organization to get customer insights. So what they do is they have, for example, a system called Lighthouse that aggregates all of the user research being done, dumps it in there so anybody can query and learn about the customers. So now if you have a question about how customers behave, what's going on, you go to Lighthouse, you look it up, and then you can see. Now, if the answer is not there, her team will help you set up different user research sessions. They'll make sure you're well-trained in user research. They also make sure they're compliant. So even in a heavily regulated industry, and especially Fidelity, they can't just go out on the street and talk to customers and like lean startup their way into things. Lots of regulations, right? So she takes it to go democratize research, and she trains different product managers, and her teams train product managers, and they certify them to be compliant, and then they allow them to go out and talk to more customers. So they're finding ways, even in a highly regulated area, to go out and still get customer research, and she's making it easier for people to do that. That's what the customer and market insights team is. The strategic research function at Fidelity, too, they are looking at how do we size these different opportunities. So what are competitors doing in this space? What's the total addressable market in this space? What's a serviceable addressable market? And they help people model that, and especially product managers, so that they can decide whether or not to launch new products, bring things to market, and they get that data and that business validation in. So it's a really important function. So that is a great place to start if you have a trouble getting in touch with customers, you're not getting the user feedback that you want, it's really hard, it's really cumbersome. This is where I would start. The last one is about the process and governance and bringing people together. So Christina Tuaro started the product operations function at Pendo. And where they started was trying to bridge this gap between product and sales. So sales was like, we hate product, they don't give us roadmaps. And product was like, we're not talking to sales anymore because they keep overselling the roadmaps. So they're just fighting, right? Nobody's ever had that problem before, I guarantee it. Everybody's fighting with each other. Now, they said there's got to be a better way. What's going on? So Christine was a product manager, put on her product manager hat, went out there and said, what's going on, guys? And she found out that the sales team was not understanding what was coming out. They didn't know, what anybody was building until it was too late. So they couldn't get ahead of the sales. They felt like product management wasn't listening to them when they said, like, hey, big customers are going to churn, they're going to leave us. They felt like they weren't being heard. Product was saying stuff like, well, we never got that information from sales. They really only call us when they have to yell at us. So we don't know what's going on with their side, right? Like, they're not keeping up the flow. And every time I give them a roadmap, they oversell it. They promise other stuff to the people they're selling to. It's just not good. So Christine went in and said, let's create a process to work better together. She said, how do we make sure that insights from sales are making it back to product? They created a system to collect all the insights, figure out what was the most important things, tag it back to customer problems, and give it to product managers and to the right product managers so they got the insights. They created a process as well where product would update sales about the roadmaps. And they said, here's what's coming up, here's what you can talk about, here's things that you can get ahead of so that you meet your quotas. And by doing this, they actually built a really good bridge between product and sales where they stopped fighting with each other and they started to actually work better together. So this is what the process and governance piece is about. It's about building bridges between areas and showing people where they fit in. Because you do need those insights from sales. But we also don't need them to oversell the roadmap, right? Like, I don't want them out there promising everything. And I've seen that happen a lot. So I was leading a product transformation at Athena Health across 350 Scrum teams, and we had that issue as well, where we would say, hey, we're building something, somebody would oversell it, everybody was mad. So I went, why? What's going on here? Turns out the sales teams didn't understand that prototypes were not coded and functioning. They were so good at clickable prototypes that they thought they were live, right? There was a misunderstanding. They didn't know. So everybody's going to sales, trying to show to customers, and they're like, sweet, let's sell all of this. And we're like, oh no, that's like a year away. And then they're like, what? We wanted it. It's live. We saw it. It exists. So we went in and we actually created this framework that helped a lot. We said we're going to tag everything in Jira and in the kind of the product initiative space, discovery, experiment, alpha, beta, or generally available. And we created guidelines. We said if it's in discovery or it's an experiment, there's a very good chance we're probably not building it. That doesn't get communicated to sales. We do not talk about those things. They will not see them on a roadmap. And we said, if you happen upon one of these things, salespeople, you cannot sell it because we're probably going to kill it and your customers will be mad. If it's an alpha, we are going to solve that problem, but we're still working on a solution. It might not look exactly like what we have today, but it's usually a preliminary coded feature. And if it's in beta, we're definitely releasing it. We're just testing it for scale and making sure that nothing breaks. So if it's an alpha or beta, you're allowed to talk about it, but you cannot promise that it's coming out tomorrow. Here's the timelines, here's the regulations around that. And they said, okay, but you can get people excited, right? You're allowed to get people excited about this. If it's generally available, it means sell it. It's available for people. So we tagged all of our different features, all of our different stuff with this, and it really helped. Sales said, great, I have some insights. I've got enough to keep people excited. I'm allowed to talk about some new fun things, but I'm also not promising stuff we can't deliver. So this is a big piece about creating that product operations governance function as well. Also, you want to look at standardizing templates that are helpful. For instance, things like strategy memos. How do we write strategy? I like 2 to 3 pages. I get everybody to just write down their ideas. Writing is such a powerful thing to just get information out of heads. A lot of times we think there's no strategy, but it's stuck in somebody's head. It's usually stuck in your CEO's head. It's stuck in your chief product officer's head. Get them to write it down. And this is actually a really good exercise that I encourage you to do as a product manager. If you're like, I have a boss that is just all over the place, and I don't feel like they have a strategy, sit there with them and ask them questions and write it down. So I do this routinely when I work with companies and when I work with CEOs especially founder CEOs. They're like, I have a strategy. And I'm like, where is it? And they're like, oh, it's in my head. I'm like, great. Let me ask you a bunch of questions. And I put it down on paper. And then I go, is this your strategy? And they go, oh, no, it's not that. But then they fix it, right? But then they start writing it. And now it becomes clearer. So it might not be super defined. It might not be the perfect strategy, but you at least know what's in their head. So I always encourage people to write down whatever you can when it comes to strategy. Other things you can standardize, go-to-market documents, right? A lot of organizations don't have great documentation on how we organize around go-to-market, right? How does product marketing and product come together and sales come together to launch things? OKR reporting, roadmaps, all of those different things. But here it's about finding what you need to standardize as a company. I'm not trying to over-create tons of process. I'm trying to say that if everybody's rolling their own across an organization and every product manager is creating a different system and they're spending all this time on here, make one system so that they can just concentrate on product management, so we can concentrate on getting things done. I also like tools, right? And Product Ops looks at the different tools. Dragonboat is a company that I advise that helps you connect all the things you're doing in Jira back up to your portfolio and your strategic OKRs. And this is important because if you start automating these things into tools, I no longer have to dig through a database all the time to create a view for my executives to show them my planned capacity allocation, what people are working on, and how close we are to our goals. So think about what you can automate to help do that type of reporting that you always have to come up with. If you're a product leader, I see product leaders spend 3 months building board slides. You get into the board meeting, you show a snapshot of time, and then they leave the board meeting, and you're like, oh, good, now I can set the product strategy. And then it's like, oh, crap, I got to do it for the board meeting again, right? Because it's not updated, it's not automated. So think about how you automate these insights that happen over and over and over again, and what tools you can use. And think about how you show it in relation to your OKRs and goals, right? These views are important. It's not just about having Jira. It's not just about seeing what tasks we're doing. It's about how they all come together and allow us to track progress for our companies. So lots of companies are doing product operations out there. You heard about OutSystems today, Stripe, Sam's Club, Airtable, Pendo, Athena Health, Shopify, Amplitude. Many companies are starting to adopt this. And to me, this is really important as we start to scale. And this is one of those things where I've just seen it over and over again, having the lack of product operations break companies. So we want to make sure that we can help our product managers, and you can help yourselves, do the work, right? Do the work you were hired for. So that's why everybody's actually getting on this bandwagon. They're seeing it as a way to solve many of these problems. And because of that, when you do this, you're going to get better communication and collaboration, right? You're going to get better strategies and business outcomes because you're connecting things back to your strategies, right, and your outcomes, and you'll be able to report on it. You're going to get better product launches because you're aligning. And you get better onboarding of product managers because they don't have to figure out 50 different ways to work to move team to team to team to team around an organization, right? So this helps solve a lot of problems and bring this back together. So that's why we wrote our next book on product operations, which is now available. Yeah. Thank you. And Denise and I, who's my co-author, Denise and I have worked together for years. We really wanted to break down for you what is product operations, how do you implement it, guides to get started. So it's very practical. It's very robust. You can buy it now on Amazon, and we are working on making it available in other places. We had 50 copies here, and they sold out very fast. So I hope you enjoy it. Please go to that link and download it and read it when you get a chance. So let's go back to the beginning. So we talked about why people are not being product-led, why there's friction, right? We got this lack of knowledge. Product operations, setting a product strategy of where we're going, that helps solve many of these lack of knowledge problems, right? It helps people understand where they fit into the process, and that helps to calm them down. But we still got a lack of control problem. Not everybody's going to be on board with this. You're going to be like, let's do product ops to solve these problems. And they're going to be like, no. What can you do, right? What can you do to actually solve the lack of control problem, right? To make people feel better. And I want you to think about this for a second. Like, put yourself in a salesperson's shoes. I know it's hard to do, but just for 1 second, please humor me. You are being paid on commission. 80% of your salary is coming from commission. The product managers are saying we're going product-led. They're also saying hey, I don't want to show you my roadmap. How do you feel right now when 80% of your money is dependent on that, right? Another scenario. Put yourself in the shoes of a founder. You're now the CEO, right? You're the CEO of this company. And you have never been a CEO before. You've never done this job. You are the founder. You built this company out there. I perceive you as running around like crazy, like a chicken with their head cut off, right? Going, everybody do everything. They're tinkering in the code. You're like, get the hell out of the code. You've never done a CEO job before. Nobody's taught you how to do it. How are you supposed to go after it, right? A lot of times, people just don't understand what they were supposed to be doing. And to get them on board, what we really need to do is have empathy for their situations. And I practice this every single day. And it's been the one thing I think that makes a huge difference in communicating with the rest of the organization. A lot of what I do now is bringing the rest of the executive team on board. And what I do is I sit there and I say, okay, I understand, right? Your commission is tied up on here, but let me help you. If we do these types of things, you're going to make more money, and I'm going to unlock this value for you. Here's how it helps you. With the founder CEO, I said, let's write a strategy together, right? Tell me what you think the goals are. Let me write them down for you. I could really use some guidance from you about what's more important. Is A more important or is B more important? So what I encourage you to do is if you run into these situations, put yourself in somebody else's shoes and start to empathize with their situation and change your communication, right? Change the way that you talk to them about what you're trying to achieve and try to make it something that's good for them, right? Let's talk about culture, right? What are your practices and behaviors? A lot of times when we try to change an organization to be product-led, we talk about MVPs. We talk about experimentation. We talk about user story mapping. We talk about agile. It doesn't matter for the rest of the organization. That's what we do. So I really encourage you to start to think about how do I change this and put these things in other people's languages. Ask questions, empathize with where they are, and that's what's going to help us become more product-led. And when we're all working together around these common goals and building great products that help our customers really achieve value, we're going to be a very well-run kitchen, bringing everybody together. And that's the goal, right, is to build a fantastic menu, fantastic recipes, and a fantastic experience for our customers together. So thank you very much for listening. If you would like the slides, grab that QR code, and there'll be links to the other things that I mentioned in here. And I think we're going to take a couple questions.
All right, so we have time for a few questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do
I'm gonna
a
leave
couple
right
of
now.
questions
Sorry.
before this is over. Okay, so here we are. You can pick and choose.
Okay. Let's see. Which ones do we want to talk about? If the collaboration between function is a problem, product sales, shouldn't we find another organization structure that facilitates collaboration? You could do that too. I just had on my podcast somebody as a product leader who actually runs sales. They run customer success and product. It works for them. I'm not saying that every organization has to do that, but honestly, your organizational structure should not dictate your communication. And if it does, you're ending up in some Conway's Law stuff, right? So what we need to do is better collaborate. And you don't have to be an expert at every single function to make that happen, right? It's better to hire functional experts and then get them to collaborate and get them to pull in. But if you feel like the organizational structure is a big barrier to collaboration, now let's start to explore other organizational structures. And I've seen that, right? I've seen it where product doesn't actually report into a CPO. They report into a GM or a business lead. There's no culture around product. There's nobody fighting for the product managers. There's no product ops. In those cases, I do think people need to modernize. So I think, though, a lot of this can be solved by communicating better together and creating ways for us to work better together.
All right, so maybe the next one, since it also has like a lot of quotes, what advice
can you give to product people in companies that lack company vision? Okay.
Right.
So this happens a lot, honestly. It's sad, though, too. And what typically happens, again, in the ones that lack company vision is you might have a founder CEO who's never had to put together a company vision before. I end up in a lot of these situations, right? What you could start to do is some analysis to figure out where your opportunities lay, how you want to win. You can also ask questions. So like I said, sometimes visions are stuck up in people's heads, and they just don't write them down. So you might not know what the company vision is, but they might be stuck in somebody's head. I actually did this exercise at that 5,000-person company I was talking about. I asked everybody what the vision was for the company, and I asked every single product leader what the vision was for the company. There was 8 of them, and I asked all the C-suite. Everybody gave me a different answer. I showed it to the CEO, and he went, oh, maybe we should write a company vision. Okay, right? Like now we're getting somewhere. So can you surface it up? Like if they're unaware, if they think we're all aligned, like surface it up. Show people where we're not aligned, right? That usually can get them started. Sometimes they're just not aware. And one thing to know about leaders as well, when it comes to strategy or vision, is they think about those things every day, all day, right? So they set that strategy, they think about it like 85 times a day, and they forget that they're not telling you that vision 85 times a day, right? So they think that they've said it 200 times, and I tell them as well, I'm like, if you said it 200 times, say it 2,000 times, because the rest of the organization doesn't understand. So what you can do is ask questions. And I like to give people choices too. Would you rather have this, or would you rather have that, right? And now you can start to get some clarity, you can start to see where things are actually coming up. So that will help. Now, if you try all of these things though, and there's still no company vision, or you feel like you're not empowered to do it, go find a company with a vision. I don't believe you can solve every problem in the world, right? Like, I'm not trying to tell you to kill yourself trying to solve this problem, because sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just can't solve them.
Do we have time for the last one here?
Let's do it.
Which is a classic for you, right? So,
yeah, what do you have to say to one saying we don't need product managers? Will they just rename the role? So with this one, when people tell me they don't need product managers, I usually ask them how they're doing as a company and how they're aligned with strategy. And I start to show them that you need somebody actually thinking about how all these things come together. Most people misinterpret what product managers do because, like I said, we've learned Scrum. We see all those practices. They think all we do right there is like tell the developers what to do. And I think the developers can figure out what to do pretty easily when we've got a good vision. I'm not an advocate. I get this question a lot. I had product owners, and I say that specifically, product owners, not product managers, saying, I spend 40 hours a week writing user stories. Why? Right? Like, why? And they're like, well, my developers want to know what to work on. I'm like, did you set the context? Did you set the vision for what you're going after? Did you break it down with them? Did you show them the workflow? Did you build prototypes? Because if you do that, usually the developers can figure out what to work on a day-to-day basis, and you don't have to sit there and answer questions every single hour of the day. If you're sitting there answering questions for developers every single hour of the day, it's a good sign that you did not build context, and you did not build a strategy, and you did not build that collaboration, right, and the communication there. So when people say we don't need product managers, they think about that, right? They usually are working with bad product managers, and they don't understand that we're connecting the value back to the company value, right? Like we're the bridge between the customer value and the company value. So I show them things like the strategy. And I say, can you tell me how all the actions of the people on the teams are going to result in company value? And if they can't, I say, well, that's what the product managers are there for. That's what the different levels are, right? It's to make sure that we're maximizing our return on investment by producing great customer value. And we need to be able to tell that story. So that's a really key part of being a great product manager. And honestly, anybody who's worked with great product managers, they don't ask this question. They go, I can't live without them, right? They're only asking it because people aren't doing their jobs.
So you better do your jobs right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.